The sun had not yet risen when the rotor blades began to spin across the barren ridges of Kunar province. Dust swirled in the half-light, wrapping the landing zone in a veil of grit and silence. Out of the helicopter stepped Lieutenant Kara Hultgreen, her expression carved in steel. She wasn't the kind of soldier who sought glory. She was the kind who earned it in silence. One breath, one mission, one heartbeat at a time. The patch on her shoulder read SEAL Team 9, a unit that rarely appeared in headlines, but often carried the weight of impossible orders. Kara adjusted her rifle sling and scanned the horizon. Jagged mountains, pale skies, and somewhere out there, two missing American pilots. Intelligence confirmed they were Colonel John Glenn and Colonel Buzz Aldrin, both legends from an earlier generation, now serving as high-ranking advisors on a joint NATO operation. Their aircraft had gone down deep in hostile terrain 3 nights ago. Every recovery attempt had failed. Kara volunteered for the last one, not because she was ordered to, but because she couldn't stand leaving someone behind. Her team, a mix of elite operators led by Colonel Merrill Tengesdal, watched her with quiet respect. She had earned that long ago, during a mountain assault in Syria when she carried 2 wounded men out under sniper fire. They called her the Ghost of the Ridge, done moving silent, hitting fast, never missing her mark. But this mission felt different. The air was heavier. Even the mountains seemed to be holding their breath. Inside the operations tent, the flickering light from a single lamp revealed maps spread across a table. Kara traced a finger along the steep valley path where the pilots were last tracked. "We move here," she said firmly, pointing at the narrow pass. "No air support. Too risky. We go on foot in 2 teams. Extraction in 5 hours, no later." Colonel Tengesdal nodded. "If it turns hot, then we burn the plan," Kara replied. "We adapt." That was her way. Cold logic wrapped in fearless instinct. She strapped on her combat vest, double-checked her rifle, and slipped the small dog tag chain into her pocket. It wasn't hers. It belonged to her younger brother, a Marine who never made it home from his first tour. It reminded her why she fought. Not for medals, not for recognition, but for the ones who couldn't fight anymore. The team advanced under a silver dawn, boots crunching softly over frost-bitten soil. Wind carried the distant echo of gunfire, faint but real. Kara tightened her grip on the weapon, her gaze fixed forward. "Stay low." "No chatter," she whispered through the comms. Her voice was calm, steady, the kind that made fear step aside. Hours into the climb, they reached the upper ridge where smoke trails stained the sky. A wrecked fuselage glimmered in the distance, the downed aircraft. It was worse than expected. The valley below was crawling with hostiles, dozens of armed insurgents combing through debris. The pilots were likely captured or wounded, and the enemy knew someone would come for them. Kara crouched behind a rock and peered through her scope. "They're waiting for us," she muttered. The faint click of her rifle's safety echoed like a promise. Colonel Tengesdal leaned beside her. "You think they know who we are?" Kara gave a small, grim smile. "They will." The wind shifted, cold, sharp, carrying the scent of fire. Somewhere beyond that ridge lay 2 men counting on her. She took a deep breath. Feeling the armor press against her chest, the hum of her heartbeat steady beneath the titanium plate. In that moment, the silence before battle felt like an old friend. She didn't know yet that before the day ended, a bullet would find her, nor that the world would remember what happens when a Navy SEAL's heart is made of steel. The mission began with a single step forward into the storm, and Kara Hultgreen took it without hesitation. The ridge exploded into chaos before dawn had fully broken. Kara's team was halfway down the slope when the first barrage of gunfire sliced through the cold air. Muzzle flashes lit up the cliffs, echoing across the valley like thunder. The insurgents had been waiting, perfectly positioned, perfectly timed. Someone had tipped them off. "Ambush! Take cover!" Colonel Tengesdal's voice crackled through the comms. Kara threw herself behind a rock, her breath sharp, pulse steady. Bullets ripped through the ground around her. She returned fire in short, controlled bursts, her shots clean and deliberate. The training took over. Fear became focus. But deep inside, she knew. This wasn't luck. It was betrayal. Within minutes, the team was pinned. The narrow terrain offered no escape, only a thin ridge between life and a 100-foot fall. Kara crawled toward the radio operator, Sergeant Mills, who was desperately trying to reach command. A sudden explosion tore through the ledge. The blast threw Mills backward, his radio shattered beside him. Kara grabbed his vest and dragged him behind cover, shouting for a medic. The look in his eyes said everything. He wasn't going to make it. Kara's throat tightened, but there was no time for grief. She lifted his dog tags, tucking them into her pocket next to her brother's. 2 souls to carry home now. Tengisdal's voice came over the channel again. "Hultgreen, you're the point now. We've lost 2. Take the flank and cover the evac." She didn't argue. Her team needed her alive, not emotional. Kara dashed through smoke and rock dust, sliding behind cover after each burst of fire. She spotted the downed aircraft below, its broken frame and twisted metal reflecting the weak morning light. A flare gun lay beside it, half buried in snow. One of the pilots had tried to signal before they were captured. "Eyes up," Kara whispered, steadying her rifle. Through her scope, she saw movement. 2 figures bound near a supply truck, guarded by 5 enemies. The pilots, Glenn and Aldrin, still alive. Then came another sound. Heavier footsteps from behind. Kara turned, heart pounding, as a soldier from her own unit approached. Corporal Reeves, her spotter. Relief flickered for a moment, until she noticed his rifle wasn't pointed toward the enemy. It was aimed at her. "Orders changed," Reeves muttered, voice low. "We're pulling out. Command says extraction's canceled." "No one's coming." Kara stared at him, disbelief hardening into anger. "You're abandoning them?" Reeves hesitated, eyes darting away. "We're not supposed to die for ghosts, Lieutenant." Before he could finish, a single shot rang out, not from him, but from somewhere above. A sniper's round slammed into Kara's chest, the impact throwing her onto her back. Air vanished from her lungs. Pain exploded through her ribs. She lay still, the world spinning in flashes of light and dust. Reeves froze, panic seizing him. "Kara!" he shouted, but there was no answer. The enemies below began to advance, assuming she was dead. But under her armor, her heart still beat, slow, steady, unyielding. The titanium plate had taken the brunt of the shot. She forced herself up, gasping, tasting blood. The pain was searing, but she pushed it aside. Her rifle trembled in her hands as she took aim. She fired once, then twice. 2 guards dropped. The others scattered, shouting in confusion. Reeves turned back toward her, stunned. "You're alive." "Not for long if you stand there," she rasped. "Move!" The gunfire resumed, and Kara dragged herself forward, half crawling, half sliding through dirt and smoke. Every step felt heavier than the last, but she didn't stop. She reached the pilots, cutting their restraints while shielding them from incoming fire. Glenn looked at her in disbelief. "Lieutenant, you were hit?" "Not enough to stop me," she managed to say. The extraction chopper's faint roar echoed from miles away, a sound like hope fighting its way through the storm. But the enemy wasn't done. Dozens of figures emerged from the tree line, closing in. Kara looked at her dwindling ammo, then at her team's retreating silhouettes. There was no choice left but to make a stand. She planted herself between the wounded pilots and the advancing fighters, rifle raised, heart hammering beneath the dented steel plate that had nearly been her tomb. The snow began to fall, soft and silent as the battle raged on, and the woman with a bullet in her chest refused to kneel. Smoke and snow mixed in the freezing dawn as the last echoes of gunfire faded into the valley. Kara's rifle lay empty beside her, its barrel smoking, her breath shallow and ragged. The enemy line had broken. What remained of them scattered down the ridge when the roar of the rescue helicopter finally filled the air. The steel bird circled once, blades cutting through clouds of dust and ash. Colonel Tengisdal was the first to leap out, sprinting toward her. "Lieutenant! Stay with me!" she shouted over the noise. Kara tried to lift her head, but the world spun. The bullet's impact had cracked her armor plate and bruised her lungs. Every breath came like fire. Still, she managed a weak smile. "Told you we'd make it," she whispered. Behind them, Colonel John Glenn and Colonel Buzz Aldrin were being lifted onto stretchers. They were alive, battered, frostbitten, but alive. Kara's mission was complete, though she had paid for it in blood and bone. The pilots both looked toward her as medics passed. Their nods carried the quiet weight of respect few words could match. As the helicopter lifted off, the valley below looked almost peaceful again, as if the earth itself had swallowed the chaos. Kara's vision blurred between the soft light and the fading hum of battle. She heard her teammates' voices fade in and out, but one thought stayed fixed in her mind. No one was left behind. She woke up 2 days later in a field hospital across the border. Machines beeped softly beside her. Bandages wrapped her chest and shoulder. Her armor vest sat on a table near her cot, the titanium plate split clean down the center where the bullet had struck. A nurse told her she was lucky. An inch deeper, and it would have pierced her heart. Kara only nodded. "Guess it hit something harder," she murmured. Word of her survival spread quietly through the ranks. Officially, it was just another successful recovery operation. But among those who knew her, those who had seen her stand in the line of fire when everything fell apart, her name carried new meaning. Steelheart. That's what they called her now. Not out of superstition, but out of reverence for a kind of courage few could understand. When Lieutenant John F. Kennedy, serving as liaison at the command post, visited her recovery tent, he handed her a folded American flag and a single line typed in black ink: "For service above fear." She didn't need medals or ceremonies. That flag, signed by the men she'd saved, was enough. Weeks later, Kara returned to her unit. Her chest still ached when she ran drills, but she refused desk duty. "If I can breathe, I can fight," she told Tengestal, who simply shook her head with a smile that mixed pride and worry. Every night, before lights out, Kara would place 2 sets of dog tags on her bedside. Sergeant Mills, who didn't make it home, and her brothers lost years before. It reminded her of what courage costs and what it protects. The mountains she once bled on were now silent again, covered by winter. But somewhere in those frozen ridges, there remained a mark where her bullet had hit the stone. A scar carved by the will to survive. No news outlet ever told her story. No parade was held in her name. Yet in the circles where heroes are remembered quietly, her legend lived on. The soldier who was shot in the chest and stood back up because her heart wasn't made of flesh alone. They shot her in the chest, trying to stop her heart, but all they did was prove it was made of steel.